Yes, I'm Alexander, and I'm here to talk to you today about a thing that has been covered a lot in the media, and that's AirTags and how they are maliciously used to stalk people and track people. So at first, I want to start out and explain what is an AirTag and how does it work. So AirTags are this like coin-sized small things from Apple, and they are super cool because you can attach them to everything you have. When you're putting stuff away and you don't find it often again, then an AirTag is a nice thing because you can use even ultra-wideband to find where it is, get distance measurements, let it ring. So it's quite nice. Then there's a second cool feature. When you put it on something and lose it somewhere in the city, like this Alan did here, he lost everything all over the city. You can get actual location updates in almost real time where those things are. So if you left something on the bus, you see it's still driving with the bus, or you can see, okay, where do I need to go to pick it up? This is nice, but there shouldn't be anything wrong with that. Or, okay, apparently then one person got tracked. There's an Instagram model and she got an AirTag into her code, and this led to the thing that after like 4 hours or something, she got a notification from her iPhone that she's being tracked, and she found this device in her code. And then she doesn't know who put it in there and why is it there. So in the end, was one of the first persons who were victim to this. But it turns out there are more people that are having this issue. So people are tracking other people with an AirTag, not their things. And apparently they're also stealing cars with it. So they're putting an AirTag on a car, which they think that looks nice, and then they track where this car is being parked normally. Then they go there at night and tow away the car, or use other things like techniques that have been shown here at WiSec to steal cars. So there are problems, but there are protection mechanisms by Apple. So for example, if you have an AirTag and you disconnect it from the iPhone, at some point it will start making a sound. It's like this. The sound is not super loud, even though it was amplified here, but it's audible. And if you have it in your bag, then at some point you will get to know. So that's a good protection mechanism, but there are people who were like smart enough to disable the sound, because just the speaker in the small AirTag, you can cut it off and then you can disable the sound. And didn't took them long. So if you check here, this video has been posted on May 2nd and the AirTag was released in April 30. So it's like 2 days until there was a video how to disable the sound on an AirTag. That's not the most reliable protection. So we have something nice in iOS actually. So if you have an iPhone, then you walk around and the iPhone will recognize that there's an AirTag following you, and you will get a notification when you tap on it. Then you get all these details. Where has it been seen at all the locations it traveled with you? You can even play a sound if it's not disabled. And it's a reliable feature and it works. But what about Android? So people in Android were complaining from the beginning. So Apple published an app in December 2021. And this app is not as cool as the iPhone thing, but you can tap a scan button and then it scans, and then you find an AirTag maybe, and then you have to wait 10 minutes and then you can try playing a sound, and that's it. And there's nothing more that this app can actually do. And it only works with this scan thing. So when you are thinking there's someone tracking you with an AirTag, you have to continuously check everywhere where you go on all the things that you have with the scan feature if there's actually an AirTag trying to track you. But it doesn't have to be like that. So we made AirGuard, and AirGuard is the solution to a problem, or a part of the solution here. Because with AirGuard, after you set it up in the first way, you can put the app away, don't have to think about it anymore, and when there's an AirTag tracking you, you get the notification. As on iOS, you can tap on it, then you get all these cool locations where you have been tracked, so you can see, is this like an actual problem? Someone is tracking me, or was there like someone on the bus with me on a plane? You can also ring it, so you can play the sound, and you get more information as on iOS. You have more details, you can view all locations by different trackers. You can check when was the last time the app has scanned in the background, how often am I getting notified and when has the last notification happened? So you can always get these statistics to make sure that you're safe or to help you identify where this tracker might be located. And to explain you how this works, I will quickly explain the Find My network. So this is how the AirTag is able to get the GPS location of it back to your phone. So when you first have an iPhone and you set up an AirTag or also other trackers which are cooperating with Apple, then they're exchanging some private public keys. So this key exchange happens initially in the setup. And then when this tag gets lost or placed at someone, then it will lose the Bluetooth connection. And then it starts publishing this public key over Bluetooth Low Energy. And other iPhones that are walking around, they recognize that. And they're like, okay, here someone has lost an AirTag. And they use their own GPS location, encrypt it using the public key that the AirTag is sending out. And then they upload it to Apple servers. And there in Apple servers is basically a public database with all these encrypted locations. And when I'm now using my iPhone to check where my person is that I'm currently tracking, then I'm downloading the encrypted location to the iPhone and it gets locally decrypted because I have the private key on the iPhone. So it's a privacy-friendly system in itself, but it's used for not privacy-friendly things. For AirGuard now we are using a tracking detection that is running in the background. So we scan for Bluetooth devices, similar as iPhones do it, that are finding AirTags. So, and we use this to save then the MAC address of an AirTag, its device type. So we also can find other devices like a Chipolo tracker or an AirPods, for example. We save that in the database and also the current location where I am currently, so we can present it to the user later. Then after this scanning is done, we check for all the devices that have been found. Okay, have they been following me for more than 400 meters? Have I seen them at least 3 times through scans? And am they following me for more than 30 minutes? So we scan or try to scan every 15 minutes. Android might delay this a bit depending on the battery settings of your manufacturer. But in the end, when all these 3 things are valid, then you will get a notification and you can check these locations where this device has been following you. And this gets updated. So even if you don't find it right now and it still follows you, you can go back always and see what are the trackers following me, and you can see if it actually continued following you. So this is a good thing. And we currently support not just the AirTags, as I just briefly mentioned, we also support the Chipolo tracker, which is a Find My compatible tracker from some third-party developer. We also support AirPods, which have the same feature, and we support Open Haystack tags, which are self-made AirTags that we created even before the AirTags were available in March last year, just to showcase that things like an AirTag would work. They are based on a system called offline finding that MacBooks and iPhones use when they lose their internet connection. Then they use the same Bluetooth features as an AirTag to be found by other iPhones. And recently we also added support for Tile, which is really not visible, but yeah, okay, you see there's the Tile logo. Yeah, so they can also be found with AirGuard, and you can be protected. So it's not just against one tracker type, so it's also against tiles. In the app, we have 3 risk levels. So when you're not being tracked at all, then you get a green app. When we detected one tracker that has been following you for no more than 1 day, it turns to orange because, of course, there can be false positives. You cannot be sure if this tracker has been seen on an airplane trip. So now when I was on a plane, I got false notifications because there are people having AirTags in the plane, and then it would change to orange. My app is always red because I carry AirTags around with me that are tracking me for testing and for a continuous amount of time, and then it turns to red. So with one check, you can see what is your current risk, and if there has been no more AirTags found for two weeks, that will go back to green then. One thing that we also introduced rather recently is that manual scan feature. So when you hit the manual scan button, you can scan manually for all the AirTags and other devices that we support around, and you can play a sound immediately. So let's make this not too loud. So it scans now, and then you press the play button, and then it connects to the AirTag and tells him to play a sound so you can find it. Yes. Oh. Yeah, and we evaluated our app against Apple's, and we have some real-world observations I want to show you. So Apple's tracking detection is integrated in iOS. In our paper, you can also find out how we reverse engineered it and how it actually works. But here I want to show you how we evaluated it against our app. So we chose 3 scenarios based on news articles we found. So there was this thing I already told you. There was a woman being tracked by an AirTag in her coat. We have it in a backpack, which is a common thing because you can hide things quite well there if they have a couple of pockets. And we put it on the car in the fuel cap because that seems to be a position where thieves want to place it. And for all these 3 scenarios, we also use 3 types of trackers. So we used an AirTag, we used a third-party one from Chipolo, and we used an OpenHaystack self-made tracker. So we can see here in this graph, that's the time it took until every tracking detection system sent a notification. So AirGuard, for example, for the first case with the code, that's blue, was taking about 30 minutes to detect that there's trackers around traveling with me, and then send out a notification. There was the same case for the backpack, and the iPhone took always longer. We can see in the logs of the iPhone that it actually detects these trackers way earlier than this. First one was 1.5 hours, and the second one was 4 hours. But Apple decided that they won't notify people if they're not returning home with this tracking device. So the first one is after 1.5 hours, we were like, okay, maybe we're not getting a notification on the iPhone, so we returned home. And then when we returned home, the iPhone knew, okay, this person is now home, does another scan, sees if the tracker is still there, and you get a notification. For the 4 hours, we were testing, okay, with the backpack, we just stay away until we get a notification, and it takes about 4 hours, you will get this notification. It works, but it's delayed. For the car version on the AirGuard, it worked, but here the scenario is a bit different because we were not driving with the car for hours, because that's obvious that it will be detected. We were using like a normal way how you use a car. You take the car, drive somewhere like 20 minutes, then you are there for some time, then you drive back. And this time in between was more like 2.5, 3 hours, and then AirGuard detected it on the way there 2 times and on the way back 1 time, and it saw that the app saw that these devices are traveling with us, and the iPhone, for some reason, does not detect this option because our guess is that it just takes into account all devices that have been found on the day. It just clears the database at some point and then says, okay, now we start scanning from scratch again, and then, okay, there's a new tracker, but it's not following us for a long time, so there's no notification coming in. So be aware, sometimes you won't get a notification with your iPhone when you're driving with the car. It can work, but it doesn't work all the time. Yes, then we want to briefly talk about the self-made trackers, because the iPhone does not detect them at all. The problem here is that the self-made trackers, those have been made even before the AirTags were announced, and their Bluetooth advertisements are like 1 bit different from what an AirTag is sending. So it's like 1 bit. If you change that, then you will be notified because the iPhone thinks it's an AirTag. But if it's not thinking it's an AirTag, it's actively ignoring these tracking advertisements that are sent out because it thinks it's an iPhone or a MacBook. And that's an issue because they're actually very easy to detect because they never change their MAC address, they never change their public key. It's always the same. AirTags change them like once a day, but in self-made trackers, at least the ones that are out there now and that we have presented at WiSec last year, they just are one public key all the time. So it's very easy to detect them. They will follow you for a long time, so it's not a problem, but Apple actively ignores them, and we also recently got to them and told them about it again, because there were researchers that found out about this previously, and we told them again, but so far we don't know if they want to change this or not, but it's possible. Now I want to go to our real-world observations. So when you download our app, you can voluntarily participate in our study. And this is then only sharing anonymous data with us. So when you agree, then, for example, all the notifications that will be received are shared with us. All Bluetooth scans that are done and all the advertisements that will be found are shared with us, but in an anonymous way. So we don't get any MAC addresses, we don't get any locations where they have been found. We only get basically the time, RSSI values, and the devices which they are linked to. And from this data, we are able to tell certain things. For example, the distribution of devices that we can see that are not of all devices that we have found with the app. From our more than 38,000 participants are 5% AirTags only and 95% Apple devices. And this is to be expected because, as we know from Jiska's talk, an iPhone changes this public key and identity every 15 minutes. So the iPhone will always look like a new device to the AirGuard app every 15 minutes. And that's what we want, because we don't want to give like so many false notifications about iPhones that are falling. And that's also what Apple is doing. So it's to be expected that there are much more Apple devices than AirTags. The AirTags change only once a day. But when we look at devices that actually send out a notification or are causing a notification, we can see that there's more AirTags in there, but there's still, in this period that we analyzed, a lot of Apple devices. And this led to the conclusion for us that Apple is, they don't document how they're doing it, but they're not always keeping this 15-minute time range they are actually supposed to keep. In this measurements for the LPM paper of Jiska, we saw that sometimes one key stays in longer. And from our database, we can tell that the Apple devices sometimes keep the same key for about 90 minutes to 1 hour, like 1 hour to 90 minutes, even though all previous research that we have done we saw that the key is changing every 15 minutes. So there are like things that are weird here, but we now changed this that an Apple device won't trigger a notification for after 30 minutes. It's just delayed a bit. And so therefore we will still detect the open haystack tag, but also trigger less false positives. To see that what we think shows that the app actually works is that when we look at the RSSI values, that AirTags and other devices that trigger the notification are normally a bit closer. So we have a lower RSSI than devices that don't trigger notification. And also we can see that we get reviews on Google Play that are showing that people are that use this app are actually finding trackers which were used to attack them. So here I have just some free reviews, and 2 people found them in their car, and 1 person found that someone was tracking the location with an AirTag in their bag. So this is great for us because then our research is actually used by actual people, and those persons are also gaining privacy from that, and they can control who knows their location. One thing that users can also do is sending feedback. So when they get a notification, they can say, okay, I want to say in one of these 4 categories, this device has been placed when they found it, and they reported to us. 1 person reported to us it was in their clothes. 4 reported it was in a backpack or a bag. 1 was attached on a bike, and 8 people were finding a tracker in the car. So is this now actually the solution to this problem that Apple is not really caring about? From my perspective, I would say not, because we have 120,000 users. So it's a cool amount of users that are actually being protected now, but it's billions of Android devices which are not being protected. So what we think is an OS level integration is the best solution here, and that shouldn't be just to protect against AirTags, but also to protect against other trackers like the Samsung Smart Tags and Tile devices. And there are rumors that Google is working on that, but I don't know too much about it. And the same thing should happen on iOS, because they protect against AirTags because they know about the issue, but they do not protect against other trackers. And what I also think is really important is that they would have minimum standards, because as we have seen, the AirTag is making the sound, but if I use the Samsung Smart Tag to track someone, it's never making a sound after a time to say, hey, I'm here, and maybe you should look out for it. Also, tiles don't make a sound, so that would be great if all just agree on some certain standards. So what are we doing next? We want to enhance our scanning and detection technique, because, as I said, Apple devices are not detected as trackers normally, because we expect that they change their identifier they're sending out every 15 minutes. But that's also a problem, because you can modify a self-made tracker that it also changes the identifier every 15 minutes. And then you're building a tracker that is not detectable by AirGuard and also not detectable by the iOS tracking detection. And we are now looking into making this possible to detect trackers that are trying to circumvent being detected. Obviously, this is not the normal attacker that does this. Then we also want to integrate smart tags, but smart tags actually do this on their own. So they always change the identifier and MAC address every 15 minutes. So it's exactly this enhanced detection we also need to detect smart tags. We are also doing a survey now on our users and other people that are victims to this, and how to identify how we can help them better and what their problems are, what the general stalker looks like, and how protection mechanisms can be enhanced. And at last, we're also working on an iOS version, which is not detecting AirTags, but Samsung Smart Tags and Tiles. Yes, and this finishes my presentation. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. So, are there any questions from the audience? Yes, there are. So, thank you for your talk. And here is our first question.
Thank you for this awesome talk. And I think you've really helped us understand what's going on under the hood with these things. And it sounded like there's more than just these AirTags. There's the AirPods as well have these identifiers, and these identifiers are maybe not changing as frequently as you might want. So I'm curious if you thought about how someone might use your application to tail someone in a city or in a busy area.
Use our application to tell if someone is
tail you, right? Follow. You're maybe 30 feet ahead of me, and you got AirPods, and I can just sort of follow you, and I know where you're going, or on a subway.
Well, yes, I guess you could do that, but since if you use the manual scan, for example,
no, it's not your problem.
Yeah,
I mean, Apple did this, right?
Yeah. So I agree. Yeah, I think you could do this, because if you use the manual scan feature in the app, then you can scan manually, so you see that there's an AirPods wandering around in front of me, and you see also the MAC address. So that shouldn't change so often on the AirPods. But the AirPods are really behaving super weird with Find My. So, for example, you can also sometimes play a sound on them, but not always. And then I think they also try to keep a connection with the iPhone. So if someone uses AirPods, and they probably have an iPhone, and they're playing music through it, then it might be that Find My is not active on the AirPods. But on the AirPods, the Find My part of the firmware doesn't really work that well, at least from my personal experience. I also get notified about my AirPods trying to track me all the time. So I'm not sure it could work, but I'm not sure if it will work. Yeah.
Thank you. I think there was a second question in the room, right?
Yeah, here.
One. Oh, we have more. Okay, let's get over here first.
just one clarification first. So if you have an iPhone and someone else's AirTag is nearby, you can ping that AirTag that's not yours?
Yes, but not if the iPhone is connected with the AirTag. So normally the iPhone keeps an active Bluetooth low energy connection with all AirTags that it has.
Okay, so my question was about the original users. Like, what if I want to put an AirTag on my car to protect it? If someone stole it to track it, and now your app just tells them, "Oh, this is the AirTag, just get rid of it."
Yeah, the AirTag is not made for theft protection, so it's for losing your things. Yes, it would work, but also the AirTag makes a sound, so maybe the person would hear it anyways. And also, if the person has an iPhone, it would also be notified. So I think the value here to protect other people is higher than protect the belongings of people, even though it might be hurtful to lose your car if it's stolen. I see that, or your bike and everything that belongs to you. But tracking people is, I think, a bigger problem.
Thanks. And we have another question from the room.
Hey, awesome talk. I was wondering now if I travel with someone in a train and they happen to have an AirTag with them. So did I understand it correctly that as long as they are nearby, it won't accidentally trigger that detection?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Okay. So we are really the AirTags have two different advertisement formats, and one says, okay, I'm connected to an iPhone, and we ignore this. And one says, okay, I'm in this tracking mode. And as long as it's connected to an iPhone, it's also not trackable. So other iPhones cannot forward the location because parts of the public key are missing.
Okay, right. Thanks for the clarification.
Thank you. And there's actually a last thing I would like to know. You mentioned that Apple specifically looks at, AirTags that are with you when you drive your car home, right?
Yeah.
So how does that work when you do not park your car in front of your house? So for example, we are now in the US, so basically next to every house there is a parking spot for a car. But depending on where you live in Darmstadt, you can be lucky when you can park your car less than 10 minutes walking distance away from your home, and then usually you walk the last kilometer back home because there is simply no free parking spot on the street. So how does Apple know whether you are now returning home with your car?
Yeah, so I think this car detection is an actual problem because in our test it also didn't work, and Apple will notify you as long as the tag stays with you. So if you are in this car for a really long time, then you will get a notification if you are around the car. But as you said, it is very likely that this wouldn't trigger a warning from an iPhone.
Assuming that the tag is attached to the car, but not to my clothes.
Yeah. So if you leave it on the car, you have to go away, then the iPhone scans again and doesn't find the tag again, then thinks, okay, it must have been someone else then. They really don't want to give you false positives notifications. So they are a problem. I see that false positives can be hurtful, but it's also a thing about how you can communicate it. And I think this locations to show you where this device has been used for tracking helps you a lot for the people itself to know if it's a false positive or not. So, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes the session. Thank you for all speakers. And now I give the microphone back to our chair. But one last thing, please, a final applause for our final speaker of the session.